Hello and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we discuss the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion, and this week, Chief Ken Kemna and I were able to sit down with several special guests during the Western Fire Chief Association's first inaugural Ignite Symposium. We highly recommend our audience members watch these episodes over on the Western Fire Chief Association's YouTube channel. This week, we are excited to be sitting down with Emergent Tech's president, David Blankenship, and Microsoft's Director of Technology Strategy for State and Local Government, Cy Narin. These two gentlemen, along with Dan Muncy, the San Bernardino County Fire Chief, presented on co-piloting the next generation of intelligence and interoperability, the public safety cloud. Today, our listeners who were not able to attend the symposium will get an inside glimpse of what was discussed during this technology track. But first, each of our guests, starting with Cy, will give a brief background for our listeners.
Sure. So, engineer by training. Went to grad school for computer engineering, and someone said, hey, I started working in the public safety industry, so I started working for a company and did fire station location planning and data analytics. And someone said, oh, this guy can talk, let's put him in front of a customer. And that became a career in sales and strategy and technology, and eventually went on to work for two companies that did work in public safety, did everything from mobile data to AVL to situational awareness, like common operating picture kind of tools. And about 4 years ago, I had a chance to join Microsoft in their state and local government team. So now in my current capacity, I lead our public safety and justice strategy in California for Microsoft. So yeah, that's a little bit of a tune back to public safety.
Yeah. My background is, I would say, sort of a blue-collar background. I became an IT person working on geographic information systems for pipe fitters and then electric linemen for a long time, and just was absolutely in love with the power of analytics and data and maps, and from Colorado Springs. So the utilities, the city-owned utility there, which the only important thing about that was that I was working in a place that held all the data, all the GIS data, all of that. So that was my first exposure to lots of different kinds of special projects, which is what I sort of evolved to, as building and doing things that weren't quite standard pipes and wires. And that's when I met the fire department. They came and they wanted to do wildland fire parcel-based risk evaluation. And this was back in 2001-ish, and so for me, that was an epiphany, that I could do this kind of work that I loved, but do it for public safety. And so fast forward, I was with the city 16, 17 years, and went to work for the fire department because of that. I was ruggedized by them. It was maybe unusual at that time, maybe it wasn't, but it felt a little bit unusual that I was absolutely included. I wasn't treated like support staff. I was integrated very early operationally, and they would just sent me to every academy and school and deployment, and all the things from the Defense Nuclear Weapons School to consequence assessment, modeling of all kinds, and then operationalized. So I was a unit in CAD that was called out anytime there was something big. So I got tons of experience in shots on goal, just being integrated into an incident, more or less as an intel kind of analyst, like where do you turn off the gas, or use cell towers to triangulate the lost hiker, or whatever the thing was. So that was such a formative experience, and essentially it's a bagpipes and beer story, but it's definitely sort of accidentally started a company with two of the smartest people I'd ever worked with, and learned a ton, sort of blue collar guy, hit your wagon to a star kind of thing, and that was great. And then have had multiple companies since then, and enjoyed every minute of it, because it's very interesting work, fascinating analysis. Technology changes so much, and I ride on a lot of shiny red fire trucks, and so I feel like a 6-year-old. It's like
You're living the dream.
There's really not much more to it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right, well, we're at the first ever Ignite Symposium, and you guys had your own breakout session with Dan Muncie. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it is you guys spoke to our attendees about, and just the overall experience that you're having so far at the symposium?
Well, Ignite's been a little bit of an epiphany for us, in the sense that there are so many people here, and it is such rich topics. And I think you can be a little bit cynical going to fire conferences over time. And I felt like almost every session that I've been in has been a world-class speaker, a very relevant topic, and certainly the selection of even the companies that are here represented are, in my professional opinion, sort of the best of the best. And so it doesn't feel like I have to separate the wheat from the chaff. It's relevant. The people here are bringing solutions. And so for us, the chance to talk about AI, Copilot, how technology is evolving, how the current state of the union in society, in technology, and in the fire service aren't all quite the same. And so we've spent a lot of time sort of talking about where we are and what's next and how that's going to work.
It was a fascinating lecture. I had the opportunity to see it just a couple of weeks ago at the ESRI symposium, which I thought was fantastic. I came in at the tail end, and Chief Muncie was sort of just finishing up, but it really keyed in to me at the moment. It's like, I think we need to actually get these gentlemen on the podcast. David, you and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other for quite some time. The one thing I really appreciate that you always bring to the equation when I'm speaking with you is you speak my language. You speak fire chief language, which is good because it's such an important part for public safety to really integrate and feel comfortable with technology, to not feel as though it's completely over your head. Granted, it is all very heady stuff, but each of you, both Cy and you make it so easy and approachable. I find that amazing.
Yeah, Cy is just the same way. Like we, in one way or another, were sort of hatched in public safety. It's true. And raised, and we paid attention. And early on, I think in our different ways, we both discovered, like there's technical people that love it so much, but it's sort of like a self-licking ice cream cone. Like they just like to hear themselves talk, and it's sort of an ego thing. And for me, it was helpful to be raised by pipe fitters and electric linemen and firefighters. And on a podcast, I can't say exactly what they say when you bring them a bad map or bad analysis or you don't do a good job, but it is life-changing.
I think our listeners will know what you
I feel like people can relate. So that has been such a grounding, healthy perspective for us, because it is absolutely about change. It's about doing a good job. It's about tools that matter to people doing real things and real workflows in the field. And that's binary. It helps or it does not help. And so your language, your skill, your application of the technology is completely centered around that kind of thing.
It's also the grounding, right? It's grounded on a mission. There's no point in doing tech for the sake of tech. I think there's a lot of that tech out there already, and people are tech fatigued to some extent. We're in a sort of a era where there's a ton of technology change. AI, for example, is moving at the velocity that no one expected that this is going to happen. And now it's like every week, or like I can't keep up, to be honest, I can't keep up with all the releases of our own products and services that come out on a weekly basis. But I think what I can keep up is how that can influence behavior, how that can contribute to a mission. And I think we're starting to do things, different things are possible because you can do different things now. It's not, some of those things were not possible before. And it's always about asking those critical questions and say, how can technology be a force multiplier in this scenario? I think, to David's point, I think we're both probably ingrained in that way of thinking. Like, yeah, sure, we're geeks probably at heart, but how good is being a geek if you can't put it to practice? So we're always constantly asking those questions, like, hey, how can I play a role here? So to that effect, this morning's session, again, congrats to Western for this symposium. It's fantastic to see these people out there. And I think, pulling together a group like this of such high quality thinking and caliber is kudos to the fact that you're so entrenched in those conversations. It doesn't happen like overnight when you're going to put out a first symposium and everybody shows up. It happens because of years and years and years of investment that you're making in the community, right? So I look at it the same way, and this morning's session was sort of a testament to that. I asked, hey, how many people use AI in some way, shape, or form? 60% of that room put their hand up. I think about a year ago, that would have been 20%, maybe 10%. So it is catching on to people. And I would say to the other 40%, like, get used to it, get comfortable with it. Because again, you can't get used to something. When you're on a fast moving train, you don't want to get on it. You'd rather get on it when the train is slowly taking off from the station, right? So that's the way I would look at it. I'm hopefully not getting on a moving train. That's a different story, but you know what I mean.
It is kind of an interesting point, like when you're thinking about technology in the past, maybe in the past couple of decades, there's a lot more sort of selection that you have. Like, you really don't want to break what you have. You want things to work in the field. You want reliability and predictability, and firefighters are particularly good at, like, even if it's not the best, they'd rather stick with it because it's dependable. It just know it's a tool, and they want one that works all the time, and whatever that tool is, technology or not. And so there is a shift, because this is not an optional kind of technology trend. I would compare this much more to events in history that are watershed landmark societal events, like the internal combustion engine or fire. Like, it's not hyperbole to say that this will affect every person in society's life, public safety, no exception at all. And so the uptick in the interest and the participation in that is not anymore any resistance to technology. It's absolutely, the room is packed, standing room, only because it's gravity. It's inevitable. Like, you can say whatever you want, but if you're on top of a roof and you step off, gravity happens. It's like, and AI is like that, and so it's just not a matter of opinion or choice. It's like really an intense focus on what is the way that this will happen, how is it happening, how can we participate, and what should we do about it?
That came through in your presentation this morning to the point that I made a note of it, so loud and clear that it was kind of at the tail end of the rate of adoption, which is a mind-blowing slide about the rate of adoption of AI and how fast people are adopting that technology. It struck me in that moment that it was like, this is, to your point, this is discovering fire. This is a watershed moment. This is not optional technology that you can go, I'm not into the personal computer. It's like, you're not going to have a choice.
Nobody's asking.
Yeah, nobody's asking. This is happening.
Yeah. Yep.
What to that point, what is the risk for public safety leaders who are traditionally slow to adopt technologies because it's got to be absolutely bomb-proof, perfect, work better than anything before? The rate of innovation, the rate at which AI is going to change the conversation. What is the risk of not participating and not paying attention and not being educated on this as we move forward for public safety leaders?
Yeah, I think Sai will have a particularly interesting take on this. I would say two quick things about that. I would say it is a really interesting combination of the best and the worst. So the first thing is, AI is just a tool in the technology, and so when you have a little bitty tool, you have little bitty pros and you have little bitty cons. There's not a lot that can go well or not well. A little tiny kid with a baby's first plastic hammer, that's a tool, but there's not a big downside. And so the bigger the tool in history and society and a workshop, the more you can do with it. A Hearst tool can do a lot more than a pair of pliers. And so the ups and downs, the upside downside of those things are more consequential. And AI is maybe the biggest tool we've ever seen. So there will be good and there will be bad. But it is definitely in combination with, it meets us where we are as humans. It communicates to us. That's how people, maybe we all used to Google something, and that's what we call it. We don't say web search or internet search. We say, I'm going to Google that, because Google revolutionized the ability to access a ton of information. But even polling in the room today, that is not how people are discovering and finding or synthesizing information. they're asking ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or whatever they pick, Copilot, and it is built into the tools that they use. So it's an everyday thing. It interacts with us on our level, and maybe part of what we focused on was it is such a helpful tool. And so if we go back to the founding premise that firefighters have been accused of being resistant to adopting technology, fire chiefs, same boat, it's because it's not meeting us where we are. It's hard to get where you're going with that. We can talk a lot more about that, but when I can say I have massive data holdings, I have CAD data, telemetry data, I have incident data, I have all the RMS inspections, well staffing, billing, blah, blah, blah. I have all of this data, and that's just inside my agency, not anything that I have access to in the community to understand how I'm affecting the community or not. When I can just interact with it and say, tell me, how many mutual aid runs did I make with my partner, or what is the difference in workman's comp or sick time utilization when we switch to 4896s, that is something a normal person who has expertise as a fire chief can just interact with. So if you have this humongous tool that meets me where I am, as much risk and potential for misuse of those kinds of things, like hackers or whatever you're into about what could be the big downsides of this thing is absolutely. But for a fire chief, it means I can instantly access all of our corporate knowledge. And instead of working with staff or systems or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to just get it so I could begin to do something, I'm just asking my actual question. And so when you have that dynamic, you have instant adoption, because I can ask about policy, I can ask about my performance, I can head a lot of things off before they're really a problem for me as a chief. That's a perspective on it.
Yeah, I think for me, AI is a lot about relevance, right? I mean, if you think about it, like people used to go to the bank to deposit checks and draw cash. Then there was ATMs. People go to drive through the ATMs. Then at one point they drove through the ATMs, and now many times people don't even go to ATMs. It's like Venmo or Cash App or whatever the flavor of the app is. And all the banking happens on the phone. I mean, I can tell you, I pull up probably a couple hundred apps on my phone that I live my life through. So it's all about relevance, I feel like. Sure, you can go to the bank and still withdraw money. Probably take the time that it's going to take to go do it.
I almost forget how to do that anymore. Like, try to remember your ATM PIN. It's like, oh no, that kind of sucked.
I've been to ATM forever. So same. I look at AI very similarly. I think it's all about relevance, right? Libraries used to exist, and they still do to some extent. But even a lot of libraries have adopted ebooks and other means of information and collateral. Previously, you have to go to the library to learn about something. I still remember as a kid, like people say, "Oh, buy that encyclopedia," or whatever, and Britannica, whatever the thing is, and read about stuff. Then came internet, and everyone went on the internet to go learn about things. Now kids learn on YouTube videos, and they ask ChatGPT or Copilot their answers to questions, and so it's relevance. I feel like the fire service leadership of today, they're not in a leadership role to sit and take notes, for example, or have to spend all their time data collecting or trying to do a lot of the mundane stuff that should be and could be automated. And so to David's point, like if you have all those other things taken care of, then as a leader, you have more time to be that leader that you want to be, as opposed to having to take care of the other things that you probably have to do on a day-to-day basis.
You must have experienced that as a chief. Like I know, working with you over the years.
Yeah.
Very few people I knew in the fire service were as progressive and as aggressive at trying to understand performance, data, wellness, all of those kinds of things. But you worked very hard to capture and analyze that data.
We did, and I tell you, one of the things that really struck me today, and I make the comment about your ability, both of you, your ability to speak in a language and a voice that I understand. I recognized very early on that being the fire chief and being able to ask the question, that's great. It's of no use. If you don't understand how to ask the question, you're going to get an answer that's going to misinform you because you're going to think that interpretation happened. it was really important for me to surround myself with people who could speak a language that I understood and would take the information I gave them and filter it and say, I know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn that and give you what you actually need because I understand the objective and the decision that you have to make. It is really, really important. And I think events like this, I think will go a long way towards helping educate fire service leaders on what is it. First of all, what is data? What does it mean to own your data? What can you actually do with the data? It would be so easy to think insular about my own organization and what I can do, looking inward at my own organization. As you're talking, I'm thinking, if I'm willing to share and have access, it gives an entirely new meaning to community welfare protection plans. You know, I mean, it's a complete game changer in our ability to serve a collective community rather than just be insular within our own.
And over the years, we've worked so hard to get at data. One of the most interesting discussions I think that happened in the room today was, you've been myopic in a fire department working, just tirelessly to get data out of your own systems, or slowly replace systems that talk better with other systems, or get data out of a system, clean it so you could actually trust the answer it was giving to you. But by having such an ingrained, almost like a generation of that focus, we grew up sort of doing that, working really hard at getting that data and understanding that data, that so much more data is being generated by a department that we don't take advantage of. We don't think about it. And the example this morning was telematics. It's comes with your fire trucks, it's on your fire trucks, it's easy to unlock from your fire trucks, and all the things that we've worked so hard on with standards of cover with our response times, travel times, everything time, from GIS layers to, how accurate is the data that is getting recorded by CAD or firefighters. It's easy to have focused on that, but that's gotten a lot easier. Like the truck, its wheel is talking. It says, I am spinning this fast. I am stopped. My brake is on. My door is open. I've been in an accident. I'm flowing water. The things that are connected that are in those compartments on those trucks with SCBA and 12 lead monitors. Those kinds of things are all talking. And so now that is a huge shift, because that is objective information that I haven't asked the least interested person in the whole department to collect and record in a report. Those things just tell me I'm moving, I'm stopped, I'm doing, I'm pumping, I'm elevating a stick in the air, whatever the things are. And if we have that level of fidelity, then we actually start saving time. And it's very cheap and easy to harness those kinds of things. And the other thing that maybe you could talk about, what you've seen in the industry too, is things like the idea of the public safety cloud, where we can share data. So not only is there a ton more data that we can use, we can realize it's not hard to get. Used to be hard to get, used to be impossible, now it's easy. And now the next logical question is, if I have this data, we've started to talk about it with like, how can I use newer tools with agents and AI and things like that to understand what it means, what it's telling me, but also I don't have to be quite as insular. Is there a way that I can unify all of that data, normalize that data, share that data, and have other departments who control their own data put that side by side and say, I would like to know how I perform on the edges, or with my partner, or in my county, or in my cities and mutual aid partners. Like, that is not tricky anymore. So I thought that was an interesting thing, and you're right in the middle of the public safety cloud and what Microsoft and Azure services are doing for that.
Yeah, so I think it's all about context. I think what you mentioned is really about context building, right? So if you think about it, how can you ask good questions with any AI tool? You can ask good questions only if you're providing the right context to the AI tools. That's two ways. One is by the questions you ask, you have to provide the right context. And that is what you mentioned, like asking the right questions, coming up with the right prompts or what have you. But then there's the other side. If there is no data for AI to answer those questions, and there is no context that you've pre-provided, then no amount of AI is going to be valuable if you don't have that data in place. place. And so to David's point, the effort that obviously we've been involved in building this public safety cloud is this whole idea and concept of democratizing access to data. Is let's focus on sort of like creating a framework around the intake and the collection of that data set. Let's build those models, let's curate the data, cleanse it, aggregate it, and present it in a way that's meaningful. So that then when you bring your reporting technologies or other technologies that need access to that data, it's now a lot more, it's clean, B, it's unified, and C, most importantly, it's relevant. Because I think otherwise we'll deal with a lot of data fatigue, and you're doing the same thing again and again in different places. So there's obviously common operating picture tools out there, there's other tools that are leveraging these data sets. And so this whole intent behind the public safety cloud is to start unifying that into a common, I call it a common data model, not really one common data model, but maybe a common data framework that now allows you to present that data to all the stakeholders that need access to that data. And building it in a democratized fashion as opposed to, so you're not creating these haves and have-nots, you're not building all these little silos between departments.
Right, and I think a way for fire chiefs to really understand, like that is a very important statement. But just to unpack it, it means if we put our data in a bucket that we can access together, then a lot of the time and effort we spend trying to use that data becomes simplified. Because I can speak, like as a vendor, like the company I have with Emergent, we would much rather push data into a common place or be able to go into a new department and pull data from a single place. Like if it goes into, it goes out to, I can have a single interface for any number of apps. And what does that mean really? It is the way that the fire service will put fire departments and fire chiefs back in control. You want to put the best athlete in the race, the best situational awareness, the best predictive analytics, the best inspections, RMS, whatever. We all use those systems. Do you need one mousetrap that holds everything and does everything? It's just trading one little mousetrap for another mousetrap. If I was stuck in a bunch of little ones, do I want to be stuck in a big one? Sure, pick a big one if you want. The requirement for big ones and little ones is that my data flows freely without a paywall. That's bad behavior. I'll just say it. When a company says, I will charge you to get your data out of your system, that should be an automatic, immediate disqualification. Thank you, have a nice day. But if you want to choose a system that does a bunch of things, if they do them well, pick it. If you have somebody who's really good at staffing and another one is really good at something else, managing anything, operation, situation awareness, fleet, doesn't matter. Then as long as they are talking and feeding that data and they're interfacing in and out of the same place, then we've all had vendors that became very good at what they did, and then for whatever reason they got bought, they got sold, they got whatever, and it begins to fade away or become a risk. We do not need to be stuck with them. So a fire chief in control looks like I can see the emerging best tool, I can put it in. And I'm just thinking about, does that make it easier at the point of intervention? Like I didn't need to inflict IT on my firefighters. I need to be able to give them a tool that makes their job easier. I want them to be able to choose that. I have requirements for how it fits and shares data. But other than that, that's how you put fire departments in control. That's how you put downward price pressure on the cost of IT. That is how we innovate and change. And anytime any part of that makes you not be able to switch a system, not share data, not talk to the other one. Like I have competitors in the market. One of my favorites is Tablet Command. They're amazing. Those guys, I've known them for a long time. They're firefighters. They have terrific software. I have software that I would say is just as good or better. But that shouldn't be the focus. If I have fleet stuff or other information, I should be able to pump that data right into their software and make their software more successful and better. Because it's not my choice, it's the fire chief's choice who we put in, and they need to pick the best athlete for the race.
I think it's going to be amazing to see it, and it occurs to me as I'm, listening to the two of you, I think you and I have been having an ongoing conversation about this very topic and what was possible in this, the Internet of Things, when we get to that place where we actually are willing to share, and we've got that repository where large agencies, small agencies, well-funded, poorly funded, wherever you happen to be, having the ability to pose the question and get some information by leveraging the power of all of that information. I mean, that really is taking care of our own in many respects.
I think so. I want to hear what you have to say too. I would boil it down, and our conversation has been ongoing, but the best software for anyone, like the most well-funded progressive department in the country, should be the best software for anybody. So if there's a price point or a barrier because of those paywalls that makes it impossible for combination departments or volunteer or tiny, one of our customers is Florala, Alabama, 300 calls a year. But they have the same software, because if we have a model that scales, it's about the data, it's about sharing, then I can do it by consumption. I don't have to say my starting price is $80,000. I can say, how about $1 a call? Something like that. And so that department does the same job with the same importance, and it's the same important part of their community as Santa Clara County Fire right in Oregon. Yeah.
It's funny, I was going to say economies of scale, but you're right, it's also economies of intellectual scale, right? Because a lot of times the smaller fire departments don't necessarily have a dedicated IT staff or a dedicated analyst to be able to do these things. And so now when you are working with your peers, either within the region, within a JPA, or within sort of the larger ecosystem within a state, all of a sudden you start having access to those same capabilities that a large fire department, a large agency has. And so I look at it as also an opportunity for economies of intellectual scale, where you're combining your intellectual capabilities together. So you're able to do what just the haves were able to do. You perhaps were part of that have not, but now you are also part of the can have category, right? If you will. So,
Yeah, but we don't want to take up too much more of your guys' time. So is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
No, I think the biggest, I would say, catalyst off late, I would see this whole idea of the public safety cloud is obviously the Western Fire Chiefs partnership. I think personally, from Microsoft perspective, I think we're super excited about that, to see where that goes, because I think that brings the whole different perspective to this effort. Also brings focus, also brings leadership at a scale. An example was this symposium here, right? I just said, like, there's a lot of investment over the years that the organization's made, and you're able to pull this kind of an event off. I heard there were so many people on wait list, including people who wanted to attend and people who wanted to participate. And so you're only able to do that with all the investment that you've made over the years. And I think same goes to this effort with Public Safety Cloud. I think the partnership, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to come out of it in the next year or 2 years. For me, I think, David, you probably have a very similar thought. For me, I think it'll be great to see the next wave of agencies adopt. I know today we also talked about the NERIS effort, and absolutely NERIS this does not in any way, shape, or form replace the effort with NERIS. NERIS is, I would say, mandatory, and any agency should be on NERIS, no question about it. I think this just takes the capabilities to a whole different level. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to come out of here in the next 12 months with this partnership, obviously with Western and the agencies. We're super excited.
Yeah, I think on the NERIS topic, we feel very much like we're following in the footsteps of a real leader and Dr. Lori Moore-Merrill, and the amazing transformation from INFERS to NERIS, a real-time system, and we want to support that. So that is a baseline capability, and I would say that focuses on a set of data, the core important data, and that's a must for vendors to integrate and send that data directly and interact with. And we collect a ton more data, staffing data, all kinds of things that have billing data, those kinds of things. So the fire service needs to be in charge of its own destiny and be able to say, regardless of crazy events at the federal level that are out of all of our control, and what ultimately happens with federal employees, federal agencies. Are they there? Are they not? The ability for the fire service to do what we always do, which is keep working and just take care of it, even when it's bad, is the digital version of that is the public safety cloud. It's like, let's work together, let's standardize data things the way that we did hydrants, or hose threads. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you have a question for the panel, please reach out to us at fireheadlines@wfca.com and let us know what's on your mind. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.